Good evening, friends. Are we on? Yeah. Good evening. And it's been a joy. We've been traveling in Spain for more than a week now, to Avila with many of you, to Segovia, and now to Sevilla. And we welcome those who are joining us tonight. And it's just, what we'll be sharing more is the power of this great soul, Paramahansa Yogananda, who came to the world to uplift it, to give it purpose, and to bless it. So we will be talking about this more tonight.
I just also want to say hello and welcome, friends. This evening and tomorrow we'll be talking on the theme of how to live the autobiography of a yogi. But it isn't the autobiography of a yogi that we're trying to live. What we're really trying to live is a life dedicated to God. And that great book shows us how to do that. And also because obviously our channel for really understanding these great teachings is Swami Kriyananda. And this being the anniversary of that very sacred occasion when Swamiji met Master and began his journey of tuning into the teachings and living the autobiography. We will talk this evening quite a bit about him and his discipleship. I think tomorrow we will maybe emphasize more how you live the autobiography of a yogi, which is, of course, more important. And Devi's going to speak first.
When we think about celebrating someone's discipleship, we think, well, that's a personal thing. How nice that they found their guru. What a blessing for their life. But in discussing and talking with you about this evening tonight, the 77th anniversary of when Swami Kriyananda met Paramahansa Yogananda, it's more than personal, because I had the great blessing of working on a book which I just completed before coming to Europe I've completed it mid-July. It will come out next year. And it's called Divine Awakening, the mission of Paramahansa Yogananda and his direct disciple, Swami Kriyananda. And as I wrote this book, Swami Kriyananda has been my spiritual guide and teacher since 1969. So essentially my whole adult life was molded by his discipleship. But in writing this book, I really came to gain a much broader perspective of the roles that these great masters play, not only in our time, but in the past, in the future, and how they are eternal guides. Our line of gurus, Jesus Christ, Babaji, Lahiri, Sri Yukteswar, Master, and the associated saints. Master said that St. Francis and St. Teresa of Avila were also in our line of gurus. Not as gurus, but they had the attunement, the same consciousness. And so in describing and honoring my teacher and the Swami Kriyananda and his discipleship, I think we have to, it's only fair and gives us a better understanding to put it in context of a much bigger picture than just one life. Because for those, I'll stop and ask a question. Who has read Autobiography of a Yogi? Raise your hand. Okay, good. So I don't need to explain too much if you've read it. But when we begin looking at the great cycles of the ages, of the yugas that Sri Yukteswar talks about in his book, The Holy Science, we there's the dark age of Kali Yuga, when humanity is basically locked into a consciousness of form and separateness. It's like little blocks of ice. My country is different from your country. My religion is different from your religion. Everything is divided and very much bound by form. And then we start moving to Dwapara Yuga, an age of energy. And these are all from the ancient Vedic teachings. It's not something Sri Yukteswar made up. And so about 1900, interestingly, when Einstein discovered the theory of relativity, that energy and mass are the same, he ushered in Dwapara Yuga with science. And Master came in this age of Dwapara Yuga, in this age of energy, in this age where divisiveness and separation are beginning to dissolve. Just beginning, not there yet, but it's happening. Whatever chaos may be around us in this moment, there's a forward movement to feel united. And why did Master come? He was sent to the West, came in 1920, sent by this line of gurus, by Babaji and Sri Yukteswar. They told him to go, and they said, forget you were born a Hindu, but don't become an American. Take the best of both worlds. And that's what he did. He came, and his mission was one of unity on so many levels. The unity of East and West, the unity, the underlying teachings of the Bible and the Gita, and the same truths are expressed. The unity of science and religion. Up till this point, religion and science were foes. You know, how can you accept religion? You can't prove it. How can you accept science? It's nothing but the mind. But Master brought the science of yoga. In fact, that was the first book he wrote, The Science of Yoga, showing that yoga, this form, it's more than a religion. It's a science of self-discovery. It's a science of transcendence of the ego. And so he showed, and why is it a science? Science is defined by that which you can experiment on and prove. And so it is with the techniques and practices of yoga. You can practice them, and anybody who's been meditating for even a short period of time, you ask them the question, do you feel helped by it? Do you feel improved? I've never heard anyone say no. Even if it says in the Bhagavad Gita, even a little practice of this inward religion, meaning meditation and Kriya Yoga, will free you from dire fears and colossal suffering. So the practice of yoga is a science because it's provable. You say, do it, are you getting results? Yes, I am. Do it some more. Are you getting more results? Yes, I am. And so what Master brought was a new vision for this age. And he talked about world brotherhood communities to spread a spirit among all peoples of their unity, to come together and live simply, plain living and high thinking. He talked about a new kind of education based on the individual, not just you go through this and you have to get good grades and then you go to the next level, but the individual development, a new vision of education. So there was not one aspect of human life that Master did not address. Everything, diet and exercise and memory development and past life memory and everything in his spiritual campaigns that he gave across America, back and forth, back and forth. In fact, I was delighted. I just saw on this day in 1930, Master spoke in St. Louis, Missouri, in America. That's where I was born. So I thought, oh, great. And we've given many programs in San Francisco and Portland, where in halls where Master spoke. His vibrations are still there. You can feel them. It's just astonishing. And today we went to El Castella, where Ferdinand left his body. And there's some speculation that Ferdinand in that life was master in this life. But as we were sitting there meditating by the painting of Ferdinand leaving his body, letting go of all his kingly accoutrements, and it just flashed in my mind so powerfully where Yogananda left his body in Los Angeles in the Biltmore Hotel. And now it was a big banquet room. Now it's the lobby of the Biltmore Hotel, still a hotel, but they honor him enough that there's a picture of Master, and they haven't done anything, built or put a registration desk where Master left the body. But these great ones come for a purpose and with power and with a divine mission, but they can't do it alone. They need disciples to carry on their work. And Swami Kriyananda called Master an avatar, a divine incarnation for Dwapara Yuga. But such an avatar, a Dwapara Yuga, an avatar whose work is based on spreading a unifying, uplifting message to the world, such avatars need Dwapara Yuga disciples. They need someone who can understand the inherent potential of what they brought. Not just, oh, Master said do this, Master said do that, but look beneath the surface of the form. And Master tried to start a community, a World Brotherhood community in his lifetime in Encinitas, California. This was in early 1950s. People weren't ready. But a Dwapara Yuga disciple came to Master September 12th, 1948, and that was Swami Kriyananda. He was a man whose life, he had not had an easy life up till that point. He was born in Romania of American parents. At a young age, he became ill. And he learned 4 languages as a child: German, Romanian, English, and French. When he went away to Switzerland, he was sent away to Switzerland because he was ill. But he was always being an American because his father was a geologist, living in Romania. He was an outsider. Then he was sent away to Switzerland at the age of 9, for his health. And he didn't speak French at that time. The school was in French Switzerland. He was an outsider. He finally came back to be with his family, but by this time there were no good schools, so they sent him to England to school. He was an outsider. And then his family went back to America for his father's work leave, and he went to school in America. By this time he had a British accent. He had grown up in Europe. He was an outsider, always an outsider. I don't know if that resonates with you, but so many of us, we grew up maybe in nice families, maybe in loving families, nice environment, but there was always something that said, this isn't mine, this isn't where I belong. And then Swami said he tried so hard to fit in with his peers in high school in America and college, but he said, thankfully there was always a voice in my head that said, is this really what you want? Is this really who you are? And he said, gratefully, I could answer, no, this isn't who I am, nor what I want. And then he just had come to the end of a life cycle. He really didn't know where to go. He was thinking to become a hermit, to get a job as a merchant marine on a ship, so he could just earn some money to go and live by himself in South America. And he was looking for a job. He went to New York City looking for a job on a ship, and he happened to go into a bookstore in New York City. and there was a book that caught his eye. Beautiful face on the cover, drew him, looked familiar. And he went to get it, and then he thought, no, I've read too many books. I have to just get on with my life. And you know what the book was. It was Yogananda calling to him through Autobiography of a Yogi. And then the next day, so Swami walked away, but Master wasn't done with him yet. So the next day, he came back to the bookstore, and this time he looked at that book, and he took it, and he held it to his heart, and he knew he had found his home. He knew his lifetime of always feeling alienated, always feeling not part of the world around him. He had found his home. And he went to a little room he was renting in New York, and he read it for 3 days without stopping. He had it on his bed, he'd fall asleep, wake up, keep reading. And he said, I alternate, in his beautiful autobiography, The New Path, he said, I alternated between tears of laughter and tears of sadness and tears of laughter, and then more tears of laughter and joy. And when he finished the book, he knew what his life was meant to be. He got on a bus from New York City, traveled the 3,000 miles to get to Los Angeles. After some misguided directions, found himself before our Guru. And the first words he said, I want to be your disciple. And if those words had not been spoken, none of us would be in this room right now. If those words had not been spoken, I don't know that I would still be alive right now, because my life would have been very, very empty and meaningless. But those words were spoken. And over the course of the 3.5 years that Swamiji had with Master before his passing, Master's passing on March 7th, 1952, so much transpired. Master knew that he didn't have long left in this world, but he said over the course of those 3.5 years, he said many, many things to Master. Master said to Swamiji, gave him much instruction, much training in what his life was meant to be. But there were 4 significant statements over the course of those 3.5 years. The first one was at their first meeting, and that was when Master said, I give you my unconditional love. Unconditional love. Where else do we find that but in God? Nowhere. People can be the dearest of friends, the dearest of life partners, but the capacity to give unconditional, eternal love can only come from a God or a God-realized Master. And so that was the first thing he said that was of significance. Time went on. Master told him, your work will be writing, editing, and lecturing. And so it proved to be. He wrote 150 books over the course of the years, all based, every one of them, based on Master's teachings, different aspects, education, money, magnetism, of course the great ones, the New Path, which is essentially describing how Master trained his disciples, his Master's commentaries, editing them on the interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita, on and on and on. But every book, Swami said, Master's teachings are the hub of the wheel, and all my books are the spokes coming off of it. He wrote 400 plus songs, some of them we heard tonight, all based on Master's teachings and philosophy and his energy and the grace he brought. He started World Brotherhood communities. Master, the great Master said, beside writing, editing, and lecturing, he said to Swami, and this was another important thing, you have a great work to do. He never said what the work was, but in the way he trained Swami, it became evident. From the early beginning, he trained him in, Swami said, that Master brought him to his desert retreat at 29 Palms when he was editing his lessons. Swami had been with him 2 months at that time, 2 months, a disciple. And he had Swami sit there as Master was working with his secretary, dictating the lessons, changing them. And Swami said, I understood, Swami later wrote, how he taught, how he made his teaching so relevant to everyone, and how to make them universal, and he said, just listening to him dictate, I understood how he taught and how he could teach others. And then shortly after that, he'd been with this Master, he called Swami, he'd been with him 6 months. He said, I want you to be the main correspondent from our headquarters. A disciple of 6 months. And he was answering all the letters. So he was preparing him from the beginning to do a great work, but he gave him the training. He put him in charge of the monks so he would understand leadership, because he certainly needed that in his life. And not the form of leadership of hierarchy. The only instruction Master gave him about leadership was don't make too many rules, it kills the spirit. And from that he developed a worldwide work. That's that's a wonderful example of attunement. But all these ways that he was training him and preparing him, you have a great work. And then there's the wonderful story, July 31, 1949, Master spoke at a garden party in Beverly Hills, and he talked about world brotherhood colonies. And there was it was sort of a garden party in Hollywood of Beverly Hills, rich socialites. The only devotees were the ones Master brought. But Swami said Master gave the most powerful speech he had ever heard in his life about the need for world brotherhood colonies. And he said, from that moment on, I vowed that I would dedicate my life to doing this. And so he did. And so I said there were 4 significant things. The first one was, I give you my unconditional love. The second, you have a great work to do. Then towards the end of Master's life, just a few really weeks before he passed, because when one lives in the presence of a living avatar, one can always feel inadequate. One can always feel, I haven't done enough. I'm not a good enough disciple. And even if your guru isn't living, I won't ask you to raise your hands, but how many of us feel, oh, I'm not a good enough disciple? But then a few weeks before Master died, he was alone, Swami was alone with him, and Master said to him, you have pleased me very much. I want you to know that. And I think that was the wind in his sails that enabled him to go forward even after he separated from Master's work, SRF. But that was the wind in his sails that enabled him to create communities, to create a worldwide system of education based on Master's teachings, that enabled him to spread the teachings through lecturing, through training a whole army of disciples to go out and teach and share his teachings. But the Master, when a guru says to a disciple, you have pleased me very much, let's take it a little deeper. It isn't just you have done well. It's you have attuned yourself to me. And that's the role of discipleship, is to attune ourselves to the Guru. It's a very good start to study his teachings, to practice his techniques, to read his words. But the biggest challenge is to open your heart and to say, I am yours. There's anything you will ask of me, I will do. And so the last thing of significance that Master told Swami, he said, your life will be one of intense activity. And God won't come to you to the end of life. Death will be your final sacrifice. And for those of us who had been with Swami, are still with Swamiji all these years, we can feel that his presence is in God. We have a beautiful little temple where his body resides at Ananda Village. It's amidst some beautiful gardens, and people come from all over to see those gardens. But many people go into that little temple and they say, "What is this?" And we said, "This is where our founder, where his body lies." And people who have never meditated, they'll sit and they'll meditate and they come out weeping. It's the most beautiful thing. And when we were building this little temple, we have our own construction workers, our own members, but we needed a big concrete pathway. And so we hired some outside workers, and there was a man, and he said, "What is this building you're building?" And we said, "Well, it's the resting place of our founder." And he said, "Well, who is he?" And the other construction worker from Ananda showed him a picture, and he said, "He's dead?" And our member said, "Yes." "How can that be? I saw him walking in the garden when we've been working here." So the presence of these enlightened souls, these Dwapara Yuga disciples who come to carry on the mission of a Dwapara Yuga avatar, the implications are so marvelous. And in fact, Swami passed in April 12th, 2013. 21st, 2013. And we weren't there when he passed, but the last words that he said, you can almost imagine him seeing Master saying, will you continue to do what I have asked? And Swami's last words were, anything. It's so touching. Anything. Whatever you ask, I will give of you. And so some of you may feel drawn to Ananda, to the vibration of Swami. Some of you may not. But we can still use his life as a role model of discipleship, of Dwapara Yuga discipleship, in which no boundaries, everyone trying to create unity of all religions. We had a meeting a few months ago of our many departments, outreach departments at Ananda Village, and as I sat and looked at the room, there were maybe 60 of us, I don't know, and I said, how many of you were born in America? Very few. Almost all the people were born in another country, and there they were in a true world brotherhood community, because a Dwapara Yuga disciple of an avatar, a Dwapara Yuga avatar, created this. So we will talk more tomorrow for how you can live, but these teachings have so many implications. How to find God, how to live in the world, how to deal with the stress and still keep your peace of mind, how to deal with difficult people in your life. I mean, Swami, drawing from Master's teachings, showed us how to do all of those things. And so many stories that could be told of watching a disciple of a great master navigate through political bureaucracy, through financial challenges, through difficult people, and always keeping his center, always keeping his joy, always keeping his contact with Master. And I'll just close. This is in the introduction to the book that I mentioned called Divine Awakening, which will be released next June. Next June we'll be celebrating at Ananda Village the 100th centennial of Swami's birth. He was born in 1926. And so in the introduction to the book, we had talked, while he was still alive, we had talked about me writing this book. And the only advice he gave me, just like the only advice Master gave to him, don't make too many rules. He said, Swami said, that's a good idea. I said, I'd like to show how you carried on Master's teachings. And he said, that's a good book to write, but make the introduction personal. That was the only advice he gave me on the book. So the introduction is personal. And I tell the story of the first day I met Swami and the years we spent together. But the first day I had just graduated college. I was 22 years old, and someone had given me a copy. I was living in the Midwest of America, Wisconsin, and someone gave me a copy of autobiography, and I started reading it, but I was in the middle of finals and I was distracted. And then the same person gave me a little brochure that said Ananda Meditation Retreat, founded by a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. And something in me, just like when Swami saw autobiography, something in me said, that's my home. That's where I need to go. And I got a ride with some friends 2,000 miles away. And I arrived, having been in a car for 3 days, hot car, all crumpled up. And I was standing there. I didn't see anyone around me. I didn't know anybody. And I thought, okay, what's next? And then I felt this very strong wind behind me blowing. And I looked up and I thought, what is that? That's strange. And I looked at the trees and the leaves weren't moving. And I said, what is this wind that I'm feeling? And I turned around and there was a man standing there, a simple man, one that you would perhaps not have noticed if you didn't have intuition or clear perception. Simply dressed. He had long hair, but it was tied up in a bun. He was wearing Bermuda shirts and a print shirt. And he came up to me, and I looked in his eyes, and I could feel he was the source of that wind. Just the thought came to my mind, something great is going to happen here. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. And as I looked in his eyes, I saw both divine light, divine kindness, but also a man with a mission, and that nothing would stop that. You could interfere with him serving his guru and achieving the great work that Master had given him to do. And that was many years ago, 1969. And all I can say is I have never for one moment been disappointed. It's just been the most glorious journey of discovery of myself, of the potential of life, and also watching the mission of this Dwapara Yuga avatar unfold through the devotion and dedication and tremendous self-offering of Swami Kriyananda.
I can read the
Okay.
Oh, sure. You want me to sit there for you?
Oh. Okay. Thank you. Well, once again, hello, friends. You know, many of us have been together with a pilgrimage for the last about 10 days, and it's been marvelous. Devi and I have never been to Spain before. This is our first trip, and we, of course, have heard about and read about some of the great saints of Spain, and Spain's influence goes all over the world, not only in the language but the culture. And being in California, there are many people who speak Spanish as their primary language, and so there's always been a connection, but this is our first chance to come here. And so we live in Ananda Village in California, Northern California, and imagine a piece of land. It's about maybe 350 hectares, so a large piece of land. And on that piece of land are many buildings. There are nearly 100 homes of people who live there. There are businesses, there are schools, there are work areas. There are everything that you need in order to create a lifestyle. And so there's a beautiful, I don't know, resonance with nature. There's an interplay between the beauty of nature, the beauty of the animals. The animals, we have many deer wander around because they feel safe at Ananda Village. We have many animals and birds that wander around. But what really ties everything together is not that we're all disciples of one path, although we are. Everybody there is a disciple of Yogananda, a disciple of these great teachings. Everyone there is a Kriyaban. We practice this technique that Yogananda brought. Yes, that's one of the threads that ties us together. But what really ties us together is that God, through Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda, have opened our hearts. And they've made us feel not the intellectual thought of this world needs to have unity. There needs to be unity of East and West and science and religion and so on. But you can understand that intellectually. But what's really important is that you feel in your own heart the desire for unity. And that unity starts with the people who are closest to you. And so the people who are closest are those that you live with. So imagine you are living in a village of 300 people, 250 people, and you knew that every one of those people cared deeply about you, more so than your own blood family, more so than than the brothers and sisters that you might have grown up with. Everybody cared about you. Everybody's heart was open. Everybody was supportive. There's no crime at Ananda Village. There's no need for any kind of a police force or anything of that sort. And yet, there's no place on earth that is ideal. It is the best environment that we can create in order to live the great teachings that Yogananda talked about in the Autobiography of a Yogi. There are great, great teachings in that book. What Yogananda came to do, as Devi was saying, at this age of the changeover from the age of the dark ages of Kali Yuga into the age of Dwapar Yuga, which is the age of energy, it requires a different kind of spiritual practice, a different kind of way of approaching God. Because we think that there are separate religions. We think that there are separate paths. We think that there are separate ways to worship God. None of that's true. There's only one pathway to God, and that's the love of the heart and the self-offering of yourself. And that can be played out in any country, in any language, in any age. We've traveled through, we started in Assisi, which has the vibration of St. Francis. Then we came to Avila with St. Teresa, Segovia with St. John of the Cross. Now we're in Sevilla because there's a very strong likelihood that Yogananda in a former lifetime was Ferdinand, and that his son Alfonso was Swami Kriyananda. And so there's this sense of everything being tied together. But as you travel around and you see different places and different ages and a big castle or a simple little place, you think, oh, it doesn't look very similar. It looks all different. In fact, there's only one religion. There's only one spiritual path. Master said that an altar like this, that's not the real altar. The real altar is our own nervous system. It's our own inner consciousness. And it's that one path to come into our own inner consciousness and lift our own consciousness up to its highest potential. And you don't need even to believe to begin that process. You just need the desire to be a spiritual scientist. Let me experiment. Let me see if this works. And if you try it and it works, then you take the next step, and pretty soon you find, right away in fact, that these teachings do work. But honestly, it is the same basic teaching that all of these saints taught. It is the same basic teaching, not so much importance that they taught it, they lived it as a model. You know, when Swami Kriyananda came to Yogananda and said, I want to be your disciple, Yogananda asked two things of him at that meeting. First of all, he said, as Devi said, I give you my unconditional love. But it wasn't a one-way street. He asked of Swami, will you give me your unconditional love? And Swami said, yes, sir, I do. And then he said, will you give me your unconditional obedience? Now that's harder, because one can give love and you don't, yes, it can be dangerous a little bit. Maybe your feelings will get hurt. But are you ready to align your free will with the will of somebody who's wiser? Are you ready? This is the real question for every devotee in every age, in every culture. Are you ready to align your free will with the will of God? And Swami said, what if I think you're wrong, Master? What if you ask something of me that I don't think is right? And Master said, I will never ask anything of you that God does not tell me to ask of you. And with that, Swami said, I give you my unconditional obedience. Now you might think, well, that's not a very good disciple. You know, he comes to his guru, he has this wonderful moment, and the first thing that Master asks of him, he says, I'm not sure. Yogananda did the same thing with Sri Yukteswar. So it's a universal pattern. This is the hardest element, the hardest challenge on the spiritual path. In fact, one can say that the self-offering of our will into the will of God is the whole of the spiritual path. You know, Devi and I spent our lifetime with Swami Kriyananda. He gave us so many beautiful teachings. He said that the essence of the spiritual path is to dissolve the ego. Now, Swami gave a wonderful definition of the ego. He said the ego is a bundle of self-definitions. What's a self-definition? I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a Spaniard, I'm an Italian, I'm an American. All these things that we hold as this is who I am, we're none of those. But we hold those bundles of self-definitions, and those self-definitions separate us from other people, because nobody, out of all the 8 billion people on this planet, nobody holds quite the same bundle of self-definitions that you hold. So your bundle of self-definitions might be similar, but it's different. Now, those self-definitions become very precious to us. We carry them through successive lifetimes, reincarnation, life after life. We build up certain self-definitions. I'm powerful, I'm beautiful, I'm handsome, I'm poor, I don't have much intelligence. Whatever they are, we have lots of those self-definitions. We hold on to them. They become a little bit like a strategy of how to manage, how to go through life. Because to some extent, whatever self-definition we come into this lifetime with, it's been sort of successful in past lives. Not very much, but it's gotten us through. And so we come into this life with it. But are we ready to surrender it? That is the question. The eternal question that God asks of everyone. Are you ready to surrender your bundle of self-definitions? Because no matter what the combination is, we can be sure of one thing: it's wrong. Because our real self-definition is I am God. I am an extension of God. I am a spark of God, and that's my only self-definition. But the spiritual path is not easy. So even Yogananda in the autobiography of a yogi, now these great ones, I don't know whether they really hold these little kind of delusions, semi-delusions. I don't think they do. But they go through the act for us so that we can see how to live a life that surrenders our self-definition. So in the autobiography, with this great, here Master, like many people, but he has been searching for God. He's gone to different saints, and he gives all these wonderful stories. He's born to a very spiritual mother, and he grows up. His only desire is to visit saints and to become uplifted in consciousness. And finally, after years of searching and yearning, he meets his guru. And in that beautiful meeting where he has had visions of Sri Yukteswar, his guru. For years and years, he's seen a face in his meditations. And then one day, wandering in a little lane in Benares, he looks and he sees at the end of an alleyway, a narrow street, he sees this face that he's seen. And so he goes and throws himself at the feet of who he knows to be his guru. And Sri Yukteswar says, "Oh, my own, you have come to me. How long I have waited for you. You have come to me." And they have this beautiful meeting together and this beautiful harmony. And it's the fulfillment of a lifetime. And then there's an argument. Because Sri Yukteswar says, "I want you to go back to Calcutta, where your family is, and go to school there." Master has finally escaped his family. And he says, "No, I'm not going back there." Self-will, bundle of self-definitions. I want to be a devotee. My family won't let me be a devotee. That's my self-definition. You can't make me go back. You're going to go back in 30 days. And so he does. But it goes on. See, the spiritual path is simply that. It's the surrender. It's the voluntary, energetic surrender of our self-will and our self-definitions into the will of God. And it was the same spiritual path that St. Francis had to go through, that St. Teresa went through, that St. John of the Cross, but also in the same way that Ferdinand went through. Here he led a life. Imagine a high soul having to lead a life of constant battle, constant warfare, constant giving. And then at the end of his life, what does he do? Celebrate his victories? No, he said, that was never me. That was never me. Let me lay down that crown. Really, my whole life I've just been a monk. I've just been a seeker after God. A beautiful ending to a life. But think about it. He was willing to lay down the self-definition even of being a monk, even of being a seeker of God, because it was the will of God. One time we went to a beautiful movie on the life of Saint Teresa of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. We went to the movie with Swami, and it was beautiful. We all came out of the theater. There were a group, I don't know, maybe 10 of us. We came out of the theater very uplifted and very inspired by this life of complete self-sacrifice and working and voluntary poverty and working with the poorest of the poor in Calcutta. We came out very inspired by it. And we began talking, and Swami said, I don't think 1 out of 100 people in that movie understood the most important line. And we were among that one. We were not the 1 in the 100. He was the 1 in the 100 who understood the most important line. So we said, what, Swami? He said, she didn't go to work with the poorest of the poor. She didn't do anything. What she did was she heard the voice of Jesus, her guru, asking, will you do my will for me? And she said yes. That was what her life was dedicated to doing the will of God as expressed to her by her guru. And ultimately, this is the story of the autobiography of a yogi. We see many, many miracles in that book. And Master purposely put those miracles in the book because, as he quoted in the Bible, lest they see miracles, they will not believe. Lest they see signs and wonders, they will not believe. So we need to see, because otherwise, you can say this is a beautiful philosophy, but there's the little skeptic in us and says, yeah, but does it work? Is it just another opinion? And so the great ones come and they show that there's a world of knowledge, a world of understanding, a world, as Master said in the autobiography, the chapter in the Law of Miracles, there are no miracles. For the great saints that do them, there aren't any miracles. They just understand how to work mechanisms that we don't understand how to work. And so he puts in the book that wonderful chapter, Two Penniless Boys in Brindaban. Those of you almost everybody has read the autobiography. But over and over, if you look at the autobiography of a yogi, and this will be true for your life, because what he's writing in that book is not his story. It is his story, but he's writing the universal truths that devotees have to face. And so again and again and again throughout that book, there is basically somebody wants to do something spiritual and somebody else is trying to stop them from doing it. And often the person trying to stop them from doing it is their own family. So again and again throughout that book, his brother or even his father is trying to stop him from doing something spiritual. And again in that book, what happens story after story is somebody tries to stop Yogananda from doing something spiritual. And he says, no, I'm going to do it. And then it results in a miracle. And the chapter in the Two Penniless Boys in Brindaban is a beautiful example of that. His brother, a skeptic, says, yeah, well, this airy-fairy religious stuff, that may be nice philosophy, but try it in the real world. And he gives him that challenge. Go to Brindaban, with no money whatsoever, don't miss a meal, and come back before midnight. And all of it takes place, not only takes place, but in such a high manner that his brother then asks for initiation. But it isn't just, it goes on and on. One time, Master, one of his most advanced disciple, in fact, was a very, very high soul, went into state of samadhi just 2 or 3 years after meeting Master and having these teachings, Rajarsi Janakananda. But he was a very wealthy businessman. He would be a billionaire today. So a very wealthy businessman and a very practical man. And he challenged Master too. It was in depths of the Depression in America, in the world. And he said to Master, well, I know your teachings work, but they wouldn't work in the world of business. And Master said, oh, no, that's not true. And so Rajarsi challenged him. And Master said, I will do this. I will earn $5,000 within 2 weeks. And $5,000 in those days, it'd be like somebody challenging you and you saying, give me 2 weeks and I'll earn 500,000 euros. And so Rajarsi accepted this challenge. Master said he didn't go out and start running around and thinking to do this and do that and do that. He went into deep meditation, opened his intuition, and asked God, the source of all knowledge. Again and again and again in the autobiography, this pattern comes, that the source of all knowledge, the source of all miracles, comes by opening the consciousness to God. So Yogananda did that, and he said in his inner vision, he saw houses, lots of houses. And so he didn't get up and say, oh, well, God has given me a bunch of houses. No, he has to translate that into the practical world, because that's the lesson here. So Yogananda went, he got the newspaper, and he started looking at the listings of houses for sale. And he picked out a few likely ones, and he said to Rajarsi, who had the funds, he said, we need to invest, let's buy these houses. And Rajarsi, it's a terrible housing market right now. We're going to lose all the money we put into that. Master said, let's buy these houses. So Rajarsi, going along with the experiment, gave him the money to buy the houses. The market turned around. Within 2 weeks, Master made $5,000 profit. But the outward part of that doesn't mean anything at all. See, what's really going on, and what goes on again and again and again in the autobiography, is when we align our will with the will of God through meditation, through intuition, through whatever means we can use to do that, then God comes in, who is the only doer. So when Swami gave advice to Devi and me about the spiritual path, he said the whole of the spiritual path is meant to dissolve the ego. So the whole of the spiritual path is meant to dissolve my bundle of self-definitions and your bundle of self-definitions. That's all that it is, because once we do that, we merge back into God. So the whole of the spiritual path is to dissolve the ego, It's done by longer, deeper meditation, which all meditation, we can think this practice, this technique, that technique. All meditation is the quieting of the mind, the quieting of the energy and the senses that take us out in connecting into the world of self-definitions, to quiet that sufficiently so that those self-definitions begin to fall away, and we see the only self-definition is that we're an extension of God. So longer, deeper meditation, and he added one more thing. To see God easy path, but dissolving that bundle of self-definitions and seeing God as the doer, that is the spiritual path. And again and again and again in the autobiography of a yogi, we see the pattern of these teachings. And we can read that book as, oh, isn't it interesting? Look at the life Yogananda had. Oh, he was so lucky. He got to do this, he got to do that. We can read it as a kind of a wonderful adventure story and a wonderful book of miracles that happened 1900 in India. Or we can read it as a guide to how to live our life. Because if we read it as a guide to how to live our life, we will see certain patterns in there that apply very deeply to us. One that I've just touched on. You will find, if you dedicate your life to trying to find God, or you dedicate your energy to trying to find God, the people around you will try to resist that. They will, some way, they will not understand what you're doing, or they'll think that you've gone too far, you've become a fanatic, whatever it is. And you will have to go on in spite of that. And it's the same with all saints. It's the same with every person. The world resists because there are two pulls. The world wants to pull us into worldly consciousness. Worldly consciousness isn't like sinful. It's just the delusion that we can find happiness outside of ourselves, in the world. So the world is built in order to pull us into the delusion that we can find our happiness outside of ourselves. And if we're going to find true, lasting happiness, which is only done through consciousness raising, we have to resist that message from the people around us, the world around us, the business that we work with, the problems that we have, all of those things that say, oh, as Swami put it in a play, the time for knowing God is not now. Do it later when you're old and don't have anything better to do. That's when to carry on the spiritual search. Now you have to make money. And so it's a very funny play that Swami wrote. But the truth in that is that the world is going to tell us, you can't be happy unless you follow these outward dreams. You can't be happy if you aren't rich. You can't be happy if you don't have a lot of possessions or the good relationship or anything. It tries to pull us into the delusion that our happiness lies there. And as Master said, there's only one promise that delusion keeps, and that's the promise that it won't work. But it doesn't tell you, the billboards don't say, don't buy this, it's not going to make you happy. It doesn't work that way. But we have to resist that, and the resisting of that comes down ultimately to just one thing. The alignment, the voluntary, energetic self-offering or alignment of our individual will with the will of God. And the more we do that, the more we find that those things that might seem that they aren't going to pan out, always pan out. The one thing about the spiritual path is that it always keeps its promises, and delusion never keeps its promises. So we'll talk much more tomorrow about our pathway, but the example that we have, because this is Swami's anniversary of his meeting Master, when Master said to him, "Will you give me your unconditional obedience?" Swami said, "I'm not sure I can." Then Master said, "I'll never ask anything that God does not ask me to ask." So what that really comes down to is Master is saying to him, "Will you obey the will of God as I explain it to you?" And Swami said, "Yes, I give you my unconditional obedience, meaning I will do everything I can to align my will with the will of God." And Master, I'll end with this, Master said his highest prayer, we can't be passive in our spiritual search. Master said his highest prayer was, "I will think, I will, I will act." Has to have your own voluntary energy behind it. But guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. That's the highest prayer, and it is essentially the encapsulation of the essence of the spiritual path. We have to think, we have to put our energy into things, we have to act, but if we do that in alignment with God's will, then we will ultimately succeed in the only goal that ultimately will fulfill us, the union with God. To be continued tomorrow.
This is going to conclude our evening, and we'd like to invite those who are part of the retreat and those who are coming as guests can join us for dinner. If you're not signed up in the hotel, we can get you in and get you some dinner too. But Jyotish and Devi will be joining us for dinner. But before we do that, let's thank them for coming.